Welcome, Towson University alumni, students, faculty, staff, and friends. I'm Steve Rosenfeld, the Director of Alumni Communication and Recognition. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Tips for Teaching in a Virtual Classroom. We are very excited about today's event, which is co-sponsored by the Towson University College of Education. I'd like to thank Dean Laurie Mullen from the College of Education and Kathleen Hyder in University Advancement for helping make today's presentation possible. I'd now like to introduce Dr. Mary Slade and Candace Hoppin. Dr. Slade is a professor in the Department of Early Childhood Education. Her teaching in educator preparedness includes early childhood education as well as gifted, talented, and creative education. She is one of the inaugural Facet Teaching Fellows for the university. Most of her teaching fellow responsibilities focused on student engagement as well as online course design and implementation. Dr. Hoppin is an assistant professor in the Department of Special Education. Prior to joining TU, Dr. Hoppin served in the public schools as a special education teacher for students with emotional and behavioral disabilities in both self-contained and inclusive settings, as well as a general education 4th and 5th grade classroom teacher. Please welcome Dr. Slade and Hoppin.
And kind of share that with you and get that started and kind of so that you know that exists, because I think that just helps us wrap our heads around this whole online learning and how to establish a virtual classroom. I think it helps to know that there are structures that have already existed before this. We just need to now seek them out and use them. So the first thing we want to start with is how do we take things that we were doing in that traditional classroom setting and still keep kids engaged in that online environment? So the number one kind of where we start, as Mary and I talked about this, would be setting up and building that classroom community and space just like you would in your classroom. So it has to be that very beginning when you're together. And if you didn't do that, you're probably realizing, hey, I should take time to do that. Making sure that you make a purposeful effort to build that classroom environment and the community. So all of the same things we encourage our new teachers to do in that first month, really, or more of school, the getting to know you, the sharing about yourself, all the connecting activities, games, icebreakers, all those same things, we can do those in the virtual environment. It's just going to look different. But I think if we can just take that mindset of, I can still do all those great things I was doing, I just need to shift it so it fits in this virtual space. And same thing to that point of the building community in that online classroom. So things to connect, having spaces, sharing spaces, comment spaces, discussion boards, jam boards to post reflections, having places where students can also connect with each other so that you build the connections across them so that they feel like they're a part of something, especially again, when we're not physically together, so that we feel that connection. And we know when we're more connected and engaged, our brains are just more turned on to learning. So we're ready because we care and we know the people in that space care about us. And then similar to that is the routine of daily activities. So I think just in talking to so many of my colleagues in the K-12 settings, they've had to shift this, but I think they've found, even for themselves, a lot of comfort in this. Like, I can have a set time that my students are online, and I myself also need a routine to keep kind of that structure for myself as an online instructor because it's new, but it helps our kids too, just like we know it helps in the in-person classroom. So having those routines and procedures that you do every day, if there's a warm-up, you do it at the start of every lesson. If there's some kind of do now or quick starter activity or brain breaks that you build in, keep those routines and those daily activities. You're just now shifting it into this virtual space and it will look different. It will feel different. But having that routine, then the kids kind of know what to expect, right? And again, then we're more available to learn in this virtual world of unknown. I'm more tuned in because, like, I know Dr. Hobbin's going to do the expectations next. Then she's going to go over our agenda. Then she's going to get into the objectives for the day. And so we have a really clear outline, just like we would in our classrooms where you're doing the great in-person teaching. And then some tips, kind of the nitty gritty of like the setup of the space and managing with the students. So Being able to use manipulatives and physical things is something that we hear is a challenge. I've felt it myself, right? So I'm holding stuff up and moving things around into the camera. And how do I do that? And there is technology that can help us with that. Um, but there are also different, just smaller versions of tools that you might have used in the classroom, but you're just going to adapt it now into this little box that you get to teach from. Um, and so you can do that live. You can do it pre-recorded. There's all kinds of different recording tools that we can use and set up almost like little explainer videos for kids, right? Where just like I'm doing that with my university students too, but I can still demonstrate and model those skills because we feel it's different to model it live and also in this virtual setting, but I can still create that space. Um, and I've really found a lot of success with kind of the pre-recorded, and then we reflect and discuss and take questions. So that's something I've really enjoyed. The other thing, as far that we've heard from many teachers, as far as managing, we miss seeing our kids. We miss being there and seeing all those faces looking back at us in a classroom of 20 plus students. Um, so what we've heard from classroom teachers is that it has been really helpful to have, if possible, some other screen, some other monitor that's connected. So it's almost like you can have eyes on your students and also on your materials because it's so different. We're looking at the screen, and so then we don't see all the kids even in their virtual spaces. So we've heard this a lot about having the two monitors if possible. And we've actually shared that with our faculty across the College of Ed too, just trying to find extra monitors so that it can be a little easier to manage all the things in the virtual space. But getting organized from the start, I do think helps. And if you're lucky enough to get a double screen, this could be great. Mary, anything to add? Anything else before I click ahead?
You've done a great job, Candace, but I would just suggest that we also remember the nonverbal part of having video. That keeps them wanting to turn on their camera, but I start almost every undergrad class with, how are you? And they're trained now. I get a thumbs up or sideways. I haven't had this yet, so I'm lucky. But, you know, those kinds of check-ins, when I don't want all 27 of them to answer, I'll simply do my 3s, my 2s. So there are some of those things we normally do in the classroom for classroom management that now can be instructional tools. So don't forget your nonverbal clues. And like Candace said, we miss those faces. So I wouldn't trade 2 hours and 40 minutes a week of not seeing their faces at all. I recognize the student's new haircut today in class, and she said, and no one in my house has commented on that, Dr. Slate. So they like to know that we see them and we hear them. And, you know, we want to talk a little bit about pedagogy and the opportunity of teaching in a virtual classroom. So I can tell you that about 20 years ago, it was requested of me to begin teaching online. I will not tell you that I volunteered, nor did I feel like I had a choice. And so as an educational psychologist and a teacher with many years of experience, I just, you know, knew I had to do what I had to do. And boy, was I pleasantly surprised in a quick amount of time when I really focused on not what I couldn't do anymore because of lack of face-to-face, but instead what might I be able to do. So I was teaching undergrad and graduate courses in gifted ed that really needed to reach students across the state. And so one of the things I'll talk about is flipped classrooms. It's sort of like eating chocolate. There's no going back. For me, flipped classrooms just help me to refocus why I'm supposed to be present with my students. And so I do ask them to do readings ahead of time and then reading reflections, not summaries, but guided reflections, and to watch an interactive video. So whether that be a PowerPoint with just inserting audio, which we all can do. It's really easy. Insert audio, save, and having them have that interaction. Then when we are together for our weekly class meetings, I can focus on reteaching. If their exit assignment showed me that they didn't fully, at the depth that we needed them to understand something I had already covered. We do lots of applications, lots of real world application, lots of emulating what you all are doing in the classroom and trying to fill that gap between their beginning to learn this content and being ready to to be in a classroom next to you in 4 short years. We do demonstrations, labs, experiments. I teach integrated arts in the regular classroom. Now that's a challenge online, as many of you have felt. Maybe some of you are teaching biology or chorus. My son teaches physical education, quite a challenge in the virtual experience. But with freeing up the classroom from lecture, freeing up the classroom from being the disseminator of knowledge, and then the facilitator, not only gets them involved and engaged, but it leads them to believe that class is important. I have had in the past students actually ask, were they going to miss anything if they weren't going to be in class one week? And, my response inside was, well, yes, daggone it, that could be the best lecture I've done in 30 years. It will be awesome. I don't have anyone asking that in this format because they know that it's not something they can easily make up. And we use lots of guided instruction. So questions ahead of time, questions when they're in breakout rooms. I love what Candace was saying today after talking with her, my students went into a classroom and I gave them all roles. I said, if you're at the top of the list, you're the recorder. If you're the second person, you are the facilitator. And so, and then we had a summarizer. So I'm using that class time, the meeting time for engagement. Also, considering the rigor of some of the tools online, certainly I have had the experience where, excuse me, exhausted educators have come to class and have been engaged in questions, but maybe not as enthusiastic as one would hope. And so I'm so sorry. That hasn't happened in months of teaching, so only when you're going to record me. But this is what we have to do. We have to tell everybody that it's okay, we're not perfect. And so I want you to think about some of those tools as improving what might happen in the classroom. When I give my graduate teachers a rigorous discussion board question, it's amazing how much they talk and contribute. And I do want to remind you that rubrics have 2 purposes. The first purpose is to guide learning. And so if I give students a rubric for an assignment they're going to do in or outside the class, especially outside, I feel like they're not alone. It's like I'm there talking on their shoulder about what is expected. Obviously, it's a great grading tool because it helps us be more unbiased, but rubrics are all about communicating to the students what we expect, and they are more useful, I will contend, a better pedagogy in the virtual world than they are in face-to-face. And one last thing, guiding students' instruction isn't just about paper pencil assignments. If you're going to have them spend the time watching a video, tell them what they're looking for. Tell them what they're looking for, examples, tell them what you expect them to gain from hearing somebody. I always use words like, there are 2 videos today I need you to watch after class because they're 2 different perspectives from what Dr. Slade shared. And it's important that as an educator, you know all of the perspectives and you integrate those, or you choose the ones that work best for you and your students. Anything you would add here, Candace?
No, I think you covered it really well. I think you just made me think of something though with that last little bit, and also just how you start like about the opportunity here, and the different options for things. So what also leaps out from the page, and also just through all the online pedagogy, is the connection to universal design for learning. And I think as all of you are alumni from Towson and our College of Ed, you know UDL and you know the power of the UDL framework. And I just, it's like it's impossible not to connect with it, especially in the online virtual classroom, because I do think of it as opportunities. I have more opportunities and more options I can provide to students, like right in front of me, right at hand, because we're virtual. And so I really like that. And I think that's just the other thing to keep in mind, like, just like nothing else from your classroom has to go away or disappear, we can just adapt it and change it and make it still be accessible and flexible and engaging but in this virtual space. So my mind now is just like lighting up with all the UDL connections too, as you hit on all those great pedagogical points, Mary. All right, so I'm going to move to the next chunk. We're not going to read through all of these, but this was tips reaching out to current educators about just kind of some common things, common themes across the feedback about things to do and tips. So ideas for taking breaks, ideas for young children, ideas for kind of formative assessments and check-ins. There's so many tools out there. And on the Padlet, we did try to post some different resources connected to each of these. Mary also already talked about rubrics. And I would say, especially that bullet at the top, hearing teachers say the importance of establishing those and reinforcing those classroom expectations, it lets students know how can I be successful in this virtual environment? Like, I knew how to do it in your classroom, but how do I do it in this virtual space? So we talk with our interns, and I teach our behavior classes even about, we can still set up classroom expectations just like we would have come up with that in our classroom with our kids sitting in front of us on the rug. We can still seek kids' feedback about how they want to be treated and how I want to be treated, and have those same beginning of the year conversations about setting up our expectations as a classroom community. And then I think the harder part is then being consistent in those in your virtual environment, just like you would have done in person. So I do think that one's at the top for a reason, because it's one we hear a lot about and know is so important. And that goes back to what Mary and I both mentioned about those routines, or if you have class jobs, or if you go through the kind of the setup and the closure of your lesson the same every day, so that it's really clear what's expected of kids in that time. Because I think we all have to have a lot of empathy for them too. It's such a change. And so that first one just is really standing out as like, we have to start there too. So right now, what we would like to do is kind of prompt and encourage you to either share on the Padlet or pull up the Padlet, because there's things there to kind of relate to some of these tips that we've talked about. But we also want to direct you to some specifically Towson and Maryland related online teaching resources. So there's some great online activities resources from FACET, which is our Faculty Academic Center for Excellence for our faculty. And then we also have partnership resources through the College of Ed, a site that's been shared with all of our interns and mentors. So I think that's a great additional resource to check out, and it's specific for the P through 12 settings. And then Mary's wonderful background in gifted ed, some great resources from MSDE specific to online learning, and the kind of me thinking special ed, but on the other end of that exceptionality spectrum of our gifted students too, and still keeping them engaged and expanding off of the learning and extension activities for them. And then I also shared this Maryland Learning Links. If you're in the special ed world, you're likely familiar with that site too, but they have recently added a lot of online teaching resources specific for working with students with disabilities. So just to kind of make sure we're talking hopefully today about resources and tips for everyone working with any age, grade, groups of students. But I do think there's some great right here, homegrown resources right here from Towson, and also through MSDE or MSDE partnerships. We also linked all of these, they're on the slides, they're also on the Padlet. There's UDL in action too. We've got things in multiple formats and multiple places for you to access. And then the link is here again too on the slides. But we want to just also encourage all of you to keep adding things there. We're right at our kind of where we wanted to be for talking to you, Mark. And we have this last slide set up as questions, but we also wanted to hear from you anything you're willing to share in this space about your ideas you have, challenges you have. Again, this is such a great opportunity to connect with other people like in it and doing this work, this really hard work that you all are doing every day with our students. So I want to open it up to everyone else. Mary, you want to add anything?
I just think we all have to give the biggest lesson we take away as faculty in the College of Ed at Towson is the permission not to feel the need to be perfect at this. And in fact, I would tell you that often I think our students benefit most when we have an epic fail. And so we just have a rule in our classes, and, knock on wood, it hasn't been an issue yet, but if all goes down, take a 15-minute break and then read your email from Dr. Slade. I'm talking about anything from losing your electricity from home to Zoom crashes that we all experienced on the first day of class. So, but more importantly, it's being able to say to students, who may not want to share something, for example, or feels awkward when you're getting accustomed to a new tool. It just lots of reinforcement, lots of modeling for them that sometimes it doesn't work. I think those are some of our best moments because everybody builds confidence and relaxes. So, not only do we hope you'll ask some questions and we'll do our best to answer, we hope you'll also share, but we'd appreciate any good experiences, both great fails and great successes who have led you to where you are now. So we just hope that you feel comfortable sharing any of that with us, or just in the chat submitting a question, and Stephen's going to read them out to us.
So I don't see any questions yet. Also, folks, if you'd rather not type a really long question, you can just type, I have a question, and I can unmute you. If you'd like to ask it yourself, I'm happy to do that as well. All right, we have a first person. I have a question. I'm going to unmute. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Joanne McGarry, and I teach secondary science, biology this year. You know how it mixes up sometimes. But my question is specifically for you, Dr. Hoppin. I am blessed with having a co-teacher. I even have an intern, and I have a couple para-educators sprinkled in there. And so, what are some of the best practices that you've heard or that you've seen? Because typically with paras, we have them like stationed and walking and, like looking for those nonverbal cues. And it's just so hard to monitor / address things without calling, hey, John, over here. Like what are some things that you've heard or seen that have worked?
Yeah, so and this is something I think all of our special educators and all those other supports, and like you said yourself, your general ed, because you have all these adults, and that is so awesome. But how do you kind of manage? And I think, so out of the special ed world specifically, and even in those kind of collaborative teaching setups, we're seeing, similar to almost what Stephen is helping us do, we're seeing educators take like different roles in that virtual space. So that like, if I'm going to be leading the slides, Mary's going to be monitoring the screens and for hand raises, and Stephen's going to be looking for questions. And then this other teacher is going to be checking in on my kids that I know have IEPs or that might have questions, and I'm going to send them like a quick chat or something direct to the student. So we're seeing it's a very different than like our usual co-teaching kind of setups where we'd have all those practitioners in the space together. But that's kind of what's coming out. And then we're also hearing specifics for special ed is doing for kids, especially with higher intensity needs, even in the inclusive setting, using a lot more of like small groups and like breakout group type of functions, where you can then have like the aide, the para, that other kind of in there facilitating to also provide some supports and accommodations for those students. There's definitely not like one solution, I would say, but I think those are some ideas that I've heard from other special educators. And then sometimes it's also been adjusting for their students, particularly if there's, my background's EBD, so that we're a lot of challenges for that particular population because it's hard for many reasons to sit in front of a screen for everyone. But some of it's also just kind of disability related, just by definition for some of these kids and the challenges they have. So I'd say that we're finding sometimes that we are making even more significant adjustments for those students. So they're still getting their hours, they're still getting that time with the gen ed and their special educator and their case managers and their paras or their one-to-ones, but a lot more flexibility with schedules. So where those students might not be there for that full whole group session. They might only be there for that breakout, and then that educator or paraeducator or the group of teachers are then checking in with that student or small group of students kind of like in a separate time. So it's almost like it's just getting creative. I don't have like a perfect solution, but getting really creative with how are we going to meet those students' needs. It doesn't have to all be in that synchronous time because it's not going to work for all of them. And it might mean like significantly cutting down the synchronous time, significantly cutting down the asynchronous time for some of the students, like the kids who just want to be there, but then they're not doing the outside work, or the kids who it's really hard to sit or focus or even stand and jump around. I hope that helps some.
She definitely said
If-
thank you for the ideas.
And I
Yes,
would
see it's
add that you know, when you have collaboration and consultation, you have co-plan, co-teach, co-assess. And in a face-to-face class, most of that time is the co-teach. These are going to have to shift. How much more could you co-plan to predict what your children might need? Now, in my classes, I you know, lack of something better to do. I don't want to lose my students in a 2-hour, 40-minute undertaking. So I actually have them put on headphones and put a timer up. So while I'm working with one group of students, somebody else is doing more paper, pen, more independent work, but they have a timer on the screen to know when they need to come back and switch roles. So, but I really would emphasize the co-planning and just, you know, using those great special educators as people who can predict in terms of learning what supports or strategies a student might need, and spending, you just reinventing how we share and collaborate and consult.
So we just received another question. This one's from Paul. It says, my school district is planning to live stream classes with in-person students and distance students attending at the same time. What do you think the efficacy of this is, and what would the best practice be for this situation?
Well, you want to start this one?
Yeah, I'll put my foot in my mouth first, Candace. So, you know, that is a big goal at Towson. And to be honest, although a little worried about it, I'm now missing that opportunity. When we went fully online, I had planned to be hybrid and to have those experiences. So let me give you an example. There are some things that are harder for me to do, like integrating the arts in the curriculum, having studio art time. And I long now for that opportunity to have had, to been in the classroom, to have been around the wonderful resources that Towson provides us, really great technology in classrooms and lots of great departmental resources. And so I look forward to that in the spring, and I hope that we can do that. So I think the efficacy is in the purpose. So, you know, I selected to do it because it made sense for teaching early childhood education and having manipulatives. And, you know, we get tired of read alouds. We'd like to have a couple books. And so I think the way our wonderful technology people who support us in the College of Ed had set it up, we had done demonstrations. I got to do this one time before we moved to total online. And I have to be honest with you, it was about 24 people in class. A little less than half were in the class. The others were on the screen. I think the key to it is to have full synchronous first so that they all get comfortable with that part. And then our classrooms were very carefully planned so that we knew where students could sit, that they could see the, you know, everyone could see the screen. And I will be honest with you, it's the first time in years I wanted to use a document camera, because a document camera allowed everyone in class and the people at a distance to see the same information, and it allowed me to have students share from who were virtual versus placed, you know, in place. So, you know, I think the efficacy is in the fact that the literature suggests that it's one of the better hybrid models, simply because it allows people, adults in particular, the choice, the option to feel safer at home, or the desire to be in a classroom just 6 feet away, from Candace or I because that's how they learn better. So I think if you really look at efficacy and the way that it motivates the kids, my kids are grown, but there are kids all around my neighborhood. Harford County went back to school, and I've never seen my neighbors happier. So there's a couple who still stay home and work, but many of the kids just long to go back, and the ones who are able to still be at a distance are grateful for that.
Yeah, I would just only add, having talked to some higher ed colleagues who have also done similar to what Mary was saying, kind of what we were aiming to do initially at the start of this semester at Towson, to offer like kind of a hybrid, but also some classroom teachers in other states who are actually doing this or doing some kind of version of this. I think that another big takeaway has been like having the technological equipment. So to go back to almost that like double screens comment, I've heard from my educator friends that that has been so helpful because there's only so many places you can look, right? So like if I have my class in front of me, plus on a screen, plus I'm managing an interactive whiteboard behind me, plus I have a document camera. That's been one of the things too. And I don't know how much, what schools or what your specific districts are going to be able to provide you, but I think this is a time to say, you know, if I'm going to be recorded, so that's going to be some screen watching me. I'm also going to be recording the class. That's another camera somehow set up. So to really be like purposeful and intentional about the actual physical technology setup, I think is another thing that's coming out. It's exciting because we've been in it for a little while. So there's some more research, there's more feedback from teachers, there's more research more feedback from administrators kind of about what they've tried. So we're hearing more, but it is still a new thing. And I think to Mary's point, what seems to be working is having some whole group synchronous time where the kids who aren't there, but the kids who are also there are all together somehow. But then having the asynchronous for our virtual kids who are totally staying virtual. And then you can do those same kind of application based, demonstration based, hands on with your kids who are there physically in the classroom. It's a challenge. I mean, it's going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be really interesting to hear, especially for the state of Maryland and the different counties kind of doing different things, how and what is working, what are the successes, but what also have been like the biggest challenges. And we know there's going to be challenges. We have to admit that, right? It's not going to be, rose-colored glasses. Everything's going to be just great and work perfectly all the time. But I think it is going to take a lot of flexibility from all of you as educators, a lot of resilience, and just kind of pushing through because it's going to be challenging. But I think the use of videos and recordings is going to be potentially another good tool to use that we're hearing too. Schools are using more of those, like I can use a clip of me showing you something and I can share that with both sets of students to watch, right? I can share like a feedback, exit ticket, quick check, question posing type of thing, and all my sets of students can use it. So it's going to be interesting.
We have another comment/question. This one's from Darlene. My challenge is locating observation video resources to give students an option to the live classroom guided observations. Do you have any suggestions?
So just to be clear, these are students who are going to be recording, or you're recording the students? You have to understand, I think from the college perspective, and we're recording our interns. So if you could just clarify a little bit, please.
Darlene, I've actually unmuted you if you don't mind. I'm going to ask the question specifically.
So it's a little bit of both. So it is me giving them resources so they can see what the actual classroom looks like, and me being able to observe them. Those are just two sides of it's difficult. So that's what I'm struggling with. I have some things, but not enough things. It's just not enough resources for me to give at this point. Yeah.
Well, I find that what almost everybody has in terms of equity is, I think everyone from age maybe 12 to 30 has decided that they can't live without a phone. And thank goodness those phones have great cameras. But there are a lot of free software alternatives out there. My colleagues and I who teach a particular course at TU have begun to use Flipgrid. Flipgrid is short. It doesn't have to store large pieces, large files. They disappear. You can set them so they disappear automatically and don't fill up your memory. But Flipgrid's a great way to capture. I also, my students really want to share the artwork, for example, in integrated arts or their assessment materials. They have to practice giving assessments in one of my course. And so just having really the software, they feel like they have the camera, but what can I do it and record it? And then anything that's recorded in an MP4 or an MOV is so easy to get into Google Classroom, Blackboard, Canvas. So that's another thing. I just always ask as I'm looking through free materials. And I did ask my kids who are K-12 teachers in Virginia, and they, 5 pieces of software they would recommend, and Flipgrid was third on their list, both for their capturing their students, as well as the students capturing their performance or products and then submitting them online.
I'll just jump in to say we included Flipgrid because it is a great resource on the Padlet, along with some other kind of screen recording tools. One that I've particularly liked is Loom, and I've actually used that to do kind of what I mentioned earlier about like the explainer videos. And I felt like it's really engaging. Students can react, they can pause it and pose questions at different points, especially if we're thinking like our secondary students, it might be a good tool. And there's so many different types of videos and recordings we can create too, so kind of the purpose behind them. But I would second Flipgrid as like a great resource. I could also share the actual link to Flipgrid in the chat too. But there's an educator sign up for Flipgrid, which is the other thing I would just add. I am really pushing my students right now, my seniors, to start curating and saving all the resources they can for this virtual instruction. So they're doing online internships, potentially with some of you. If so, thank you. So with their mentor teachers, really like organizing and like identifying tools that they really like, that they found work well for them from the teacher side, but also if we're using them in class that they felt like work well and are engaging for them from the student side. And yeah, that's such a great idea, Joanne, about using Flipgrid for introductions and pronouncing names. So going back to that classroom community, and it's engaging and it's quick and it's easy to post. But we are really pushing like free, easily accessible, flexible online materials are what we want our soon to be teachers and future graduates using, but also what we want our students to get really familiar with and being able to access and manipulate and utilize for their own learning.
And one of the K-12 technology specialist coordinators out in the field recommended Nearpod to me about 3 weeks ago, and I love it. It's just, again, a free resource for educators, and it's a chance to have slides and audio and video sort of interrelated. So it makes, I know some people feel like the recorded video, the talking head, isn't what they want. Nearpod makes it interactive. So instead of saying to the students, pause this video and think about this, there's actually built into the software all sorts of ways to have them enter an answer to a question, to post a response, to have a reflection. You can add timers so that as that timer is ticking away, a student is thinking. And so Nearpod, Nearpod, as well as Flipgrid, is what our former students in the field are saying are really great tools for them right now. And I learned that, and I got to tell you, because I use both. In fact, in early childhood education, we use Flipgrid as a way to post our assignments that we are collecting while our students are spending their 2 days in the field. And they also are filming parent conferences. So here's assessment, and then I want to talk to a parent who may not be available during the day to meet with me. So I record an interactive video so that they can still ask questions, et cetera, that I can respond to later. So there are some great tools, I wish there was just a better way for us all to share them. Final thing I would tell you is either ask a friend or ask a student. What's something another teacher used that you really like? And that's how I learned about a PDF maker on my phone. So instead of having to scan something at the printer at home or drive to Hawkins Hall and run through the scanner there, I use a free Adobe PDF app where I take a picture with the phone and it turns it into not pictures, but it converts it to a really nice PDF document. So, I just think we need to, maybe talk to each other, ask more often, what is it that you're using that you like? And don't, my advice is don't pay for anything where you haven't asked about a educational discount or exclusion from payment. Most of the better apps have those.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And we have, I know I just posted it, but on the Padlet too, we've linked to a bunch of these great resources and some of these additional things that you all have mentioned and that we've shared about today. There's so much. And I think that's why we were like, we're going to just get them started. We're going to have some ideas out there. But I do think we don't know what we don't know, right? So like we don't know that there's these other resources out there until we ask or we find out about it. And so I do think like we're all missing that connection too. So to have those conversations with your colleagues, even if it's just like what's one new tech tool a week or like one tech success, whether it's a tool or not, just something that went well, like doing a formative assessment in the middle of my whatever, or a quick check or so I think I personally know I valued it before very much, my students' feedback, but I am just dying for it now because I can't see them. I can't do the same interactions with them. So any opportunities to, keep our kids engaged, get that feedback from them, but also do the same with your colleagues, get their feedback. What's working, because I think that's why I think Mary and I both were excited to do this today. We're like, we get to talk to a whole group of current educators and alumni. So we have this awesome Towson connection. And also like, they're going to have ideas. They're going to have all these things like right out of the classroom from today, potentially to share. And I hope that you all do that. I hope that you do feel not only that you'll use the resources, kind of some of the stuff we put together and try something new or just add to it, because I know this is definitely, it's not an exhaustive list. So we would love additional tips, resources, links, tools. And I think Mary and I both are like the kind of educators who we want to pick it up and try it right away. So I'm like excited to just keep, and then we're teaching your future colleagues. So that's also why it's really valuable for us to like know what you're using, because we want our interns and our future TU graduates and to like go out in the schools and be awesome like all of you are, and just how you're representing the College of Ed. And just especially in these trying times, like we want to give you some great future colleagues to keep working with and like working your magic with, especially in these crazy pandemic times, so
and
are there
I
other
will tell you,
questions? Okay.
yeah, strange circumstances have come up. So apparently I'm the lady on the block without any young kids. And so early on in the semester, the people with 2 or 3 middle and high schoolers would send one to my house just to reduce the amount of bandwidth pressure at any given time. So I had these 2 middle school kids downstairs working, and I just took advantage of it and I asked 3 questions. What is it that you wish your teachers did more of to help you learn online? What is it that you wish that your teachers would do less of that would help you learn online? And then share with me something. These are middle school kids. So they had multiple teachers that, if I was your English teacher, what has the math teacher done? Or what has the social studies teacher done that might help me? So, I've tried doing that with my own students now as they have multiple faculty at the College of Ed. And so again, what could I do more of? What could I do less of? And what's something another teacher has done that would really help you? And I did that today. I said to them, I was talking to Dr. Hoppin and she gave me a great idea. And so afterwards they all said, you should give us roles every time we go in the breakout room. I was like, we will.
So we probably have time for one more question. If anyone has one, please let me know in the chat box, either by saying I have a question or typing your question.
Yeah, I'm also gonna drop in our contact information. It's on the same last slide, but just so that you all have it too, just easy to copy and paste right here. Again, I mean, I know Mary and I have said this, but as we're waiting to see if there's any final questions coming in, we want to hear from you. We don't want this to be like the end of a conversation, so please feel free. We love hearing from alumni anyway, but we would love to hear from you about like just any additional tips, what your experience is like, things working really well, challenges that that we can potentially help troubleshoot or give ideas, or just share what we've heard from other educators kind of going through this, just like you all, in the trenches.
I'm not seeing anything come through. So I'll think that you guys did a wonderful job. I'm positive of that part. I just want to thank everybody for being here, and the two of you for really sharing this expertise and knowledge with the group. I'm hoping everyone that was here today enjoyed it, and I hope you leave with some new perspectives and hopefully, as we said, some new techniques you can put into place right away in the classroom. And this is personally to you. I'm going to thank all the teachers on this call for doing what you're doing. I couldn't do it. I mean, I sit home with a 4-year-old and an 11-month-old, and I'm pulling my hair out. So thank you for doing what you're doing from the bottom of my heart, even in outside of pandemic times. Thank you for teaching our kids. I want to also let you know we have some upcoming events. We hope everyone will join. On November 10th, we are co-hosting a talk on the history of Veterans Day with veteran Rex Rayfield. Our TU archivist, Felicity Knox, will be joining Rex to share the impact of service members and veterans on the TU's campus. Then on November 18th, we will be hosting a virtual wine tasting with alumnus Bert Basignani and his wife Lynn of Basignani Winery. You can register and learn more about these events at alumni.towson.edu/events. I'd like to once again thank Dean Laurie Mullen for her support of this discussion. Make sure you all follow the Alumni Association on our social media pages and on Tiger Connect, our alumni community. These details are posted in the screen now. Thank you all again so very, very much, and I hope to see you again next time.